evangelist. Thank you so much for coming on the journey. You are an amazing woman, and I love you so much. And your teaching in June was just phenomenal. So thank you for coming on the show, and welcome to the journey.
Thank you so much. You know how much I love Healing Journeys, and you and Butch and the whole team and everything. So it's just a privilege and an honor to be here.
Well, I want to get right into our discussion only because if I was watching and I needed answers, it's like, yeah, quit talking, Julieann, quit talking. Let's get to the meat of this. So already you've spoken so much about your story, but I just kind of wanted to dive in a little deeper with things and give me a better understanding. Well, first of all, I think the first time we met you was in Chicago, right?
Texas.
It was
at the very first. Yeah, I was at the very first Healing Journey. And then I went to Chicago, and then I went to the one in California too.
Yeah, so you were kind of like one of our biggest fans, right?
Yeah, I am your biggest fan.
Right. You're our groupie. But no, we love it. And I think you really had come there to begin with to really hear from Nichole Marbach.
Actually, Niki. It was Niki. I reached out to Niki because I received Andrew's "You've Already Got It" book. I actually received that for free. A friend of mine had shared a Facebook post, and he was giving it away free. So I got that book, but I wasn't at a place, and I don't know if you want to go here yet, but I actually couldn't read the Bible or go to church or read a book without a panic attack, because I associated God with, with anxiety and everything from all the stuff I went through at a church. And so I read the "You've Already Got It" book, and Niki Jonske, he talks about her healing journey in there. So I immediately went there, and then I went and found her on social media, and she told me about the conference.
Wow. All right. Yes, we are going to dive into that, what you just said. But let's start off with this. Like, where are you from? Where were you raised? And like, what was your life like?
Yeah. So my parents I was born in Denver, but then my dad was in the military in the Air Force in Denver, and they met in Denver. But then his family, dad was a farmer in the Midwest. And so he really wanted to, because he was getting ready to be drafted for Vietnam and everything. So he enlisted first, so he could have a little bit more control over that. And then after he served his 4 years, he wanted to go back and farm with his dad. So my mom, they had just had me and everything. They moved to the Midwest. And so I grew up in a small town of like 325 people.
In Colorado?
No, in the Midwest, in Missouri.
Oh, okay, in Missouri. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So it was like a super small town. My mom, obviously culture shock to her because she was a city girl and everything. So I actually grew up in what you would as a girl next door, white picket fence type of family. We went to church, always were in church. My parents were involved in church. So anytime the doors were open, they were very strict. No secular music, just very super strict. It was a non-denominational church. And when I was 14, I was saved when I was 8. And when I was 14, I was filled with the Holy Spirit. But the way it happened, I didn't nothing was explained to me. It was kind of forced on me, and I was kind of confused and I prayed in tongues that day, but then I just never used it after that because I didn't understand it or anything. But the church I was raised in was very, very, very legalistic. I mean, they were even there's certain Christian musicians that you couldn't listen to, and just, you couldn't do this or that. It was just all a bunch of rules and everything. So I never grew up knowing a relationship with Jesus. It was just follow these rules as much as I can.
See, that's what I don't understand. I get so angry. I get so passionate. Remember, I'm not mad. I'm just passionate. But I get so passionate and mad at the fact that, it's like they're using God to destroy people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't understand that. That is just awful. And
and it's exhausting too. It's like you can only do it for so long. So I really backslid after I graduated high school. I actually met a guy.
Yeah. Did you feel though, when you say you backslid, so what does that mean? You felt like, well, I can't never be good enough. I can't ever, be the model Christian child. What goes through your mind to where you would say forget it?
I felt like I wasn't having fun. I was so restricted, and all my friends were going out and on the weekends and having fun and stuff. And I wasn't even allowed to go, so I'd hear all these stories about, I didn't have a connection with a lot of my school friends because I couldn't go out on the weekends and hang out with them. And obviously they were partying and drinking and whatever and stuff. But so I just like never had that real connection, and I felt like I was missing out. So that's
Now,
where a lot of it came from.
did you even have a youth group? Because the church was so
We
small.
did. Actually, we had a youth group, and I will say that my youth pastors and my Sunday school teacher of anybody really influenced my life. And it came to be where I really, because I couldn't listen to secular music, but my parents would let me listen to all the Christian music I wanted to. Christian music became my church, and that was in the 80s. And so that was who I looked up to, as far as like spiritually and everything. But, it was pretty a lot of empty, type of music back then too. So I really wasn't growing in the word.
What were your favorite songs and artists back then?
Petra, Whiteheart, Amy Grant, all of that. And so I started like going to all the concerts like around. So my youth group, I wanted to go to this like festival with all of these Christian musicians and stuff. And so my youth pastors are like, they didn't believe we could even get enough youth to go. So they said, if you get enough youth to go, then we will actually take you. And so they were impressed. Within like a week, I had like 20 people that were signed up to go, and they didn't think I could do it. So then they were like, well, now we got to follow through. So it kind of started a trend where we would go to different concerts as a youth group. And my youth pastors, they did have an impact on my life, I would say, if anybody, and they weren't judgmental or as legalistic. So I got a hint, but I didn't get the relationship part still.
So let me ask you a question again, because we can dig in this. What needed to happen? And what would you say needs to happen in the church today for the youth that don't know Jesus because of the teaching that goes on?
I think like the thing that like drew me to Healing Journeys was I heard that you guys, like, for one, the how much God loves us, that was like not talked about, and I didn't know that. It was like I saw God almost like as like an Old Testament God, where it's like you reverence him, but I didn't know about that he really loved me so much and what that meant. I just, it was just like almost just a ritual. You go through the process, you get saved so you don't go to hell, and then that's kind of it. And they need to know really the true nature of God and how much he loves them and what a relationship looks like.
Even if you make a mistake or not, right? Even if you screw up and you do something.
Yeah.
Barry Bennett just taught, and I love this, and he said the Pharisees did not know the goodness of God.
Yeah.
That was so true. It's like we don't even think about that. They did not know how good he was.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So now, now you're able to go to concerts, and so and then now we're going
so it's somewhat of something going on. But so my senior year, this kid and his family moved to our town, and it was a guy that was a senior also. So I met him. We quickly started dating. And we were high school sweethearts. The end of my senior year, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And I mean, obviously, we were like, some people can marry young, but we should not have, because he was not mature enough. I'm sure I wasn't either, and he just never stopped dating. And so from the very beginning, we got married, and he just didn't stop dating. Within 6 months, he was lying and cheating and partying and just everything. And before I had met him, I had enough like morals, enough knowledge in some things I knew not to be unequally yoked. And he hadn't come from a church environment or that. So initially I told him, no, I can't marry you, because I do want to have somebody with the same belief system as I do and everything. Well, the next week he came to me and he's like, oh, I asked Jesus into my heart. And I honestly don't think he really did. I think he just said that to like get me to say yes, because I never saw the action behind what he said. And so we got married, and it just, within 6 months, it was just crash and burn, just really on a bad path. We ended up moving to Denver, and so lived there for 5 or 6 years. And things just got worse and worse. I thought, oh, maybe if he moves away from his parents, because his parents were a little too involved, that maybe then we could have a relationship and really get things on the right track. And it never worked out. It never happened. He would just be gone for literally 2 or 3 days, come home in the morning, get dressed and go back to work, be gone for 2 or 3 days. And I would be up in the middle of the night, like in a panic, thinking he's on the side of the road dead, or just like all these bad thoughts would come to me, and I would just be freaking out. And I'd call my parents and at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'd be freaking out. I can't find him. I don't know where he is, and just didn't know what was going on. But then he'd come home and and so he'd stopped. Even when he'd come home, he would ignore me. Like he didn't even say hi, didn't anything. It was just like, so it was a lot of emotional, trauma there, and a lot of just neglect and everything. About 5 years into our marriage, I got pregnant, and I thought, well, maybe now he'll like pay attention to me. And I mean, obviously we paid attention for a few minutes there, but I'm like, maybe now he'll like pay attention to me, or we can have a family and things, he'll grow up and everything. And it just got even worse. And so he wanted nothing to do with the baby or anything. He just kind of was sometimes around, sometimes not. And so my brother had invited me out to California to stay to come for just a visit, so he could meet my daughter, and I could meet his new wife, who I had never met her before, because they married after about 6 weeks of knowing each other. So I went out there, and they just
like
and they knew it was,
your family.
What's that?
Is this like a trend in your family?
Oh my gosh. No, it's actually not, but those 2 times. So anyway, they knew what was going on with Kyle, and the hard, the issues I was having with him and stuff. And they said, why don't you just stay with us for a little bit, get your thoughts together and everything. And so I was like, okay. So I didn't fly back when I was supposed to. And for 3 months I was there, and my ex just did not even contact us or anything. And so I thought, well, he doesn't, it just reaffirmed he didn't care, to me. So they're like, why don't you stay with us, get a job, and just like stay here. But I needed a job, but I had a daughter, and I had no way to like, go out, look for a job and keep her and everything. So I actually called my mom and asked if they could take her for just a couple weeks so I could get on my feet and everything. And they said no. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. Then all of a sudden my ex called, and he's like, I'd like to see my daughter. And I thought, and at first I was like, well, no, I mean, it's weird that he's calling right now. I don't know about this. I mean, obviously he could see her, but I didn't know if I wanted to like have her take her, and go somewhere at that time, because I just didn't know where he was coming from. And my sister-in-law was like, you need to like, she's like, you need to have him take her so you can get your feet on the ground, and then you can always get her back and everything. So I finally said yes to him. And he came and picked her up. He gave me a money order to help with some formula that I gave him. And then he like took off with her, and he was supposed to bring her back in 2 weeks, and he didn't. He just didn't show up in 2 weeks.
Well, wait, now let's go back. Because you had a baby.
Yeah.
and what's your baby's name?
Kiara.
Okay. And so at this point, how old was Kiara when her dad came?
She was 9 months old.
Oh, wow. So that was a lot of faith, handing a 9-month-old baby over to
I know. And like, honestly, I wasn't thinking, I was so just like traumatized by so much stuff and everything. I wasn't even like thinking right. I was just like, how am I going to survive, or what am I going to do? And he is showing now, obviously he comes from a good moral family and everything. So I knew that like his parents, would help him, and he wouldn't like do anything bad to her, so she'd be safe in that way. And he never, like, I just never would have guessed he would not have returned her or anything. So
what did you do? Were you calling him and he wouldn't return?
I did. I called him and the phone was disconnected.
No.
And then I'm like, now what? And I was really freaking out. And I'm like, what is going on? So I called my dad, and my dad's like, oh, I think, because his parents lived in the same town as my dad.
Right.
And he's like, well, I've seen him around here and stuff. So then I ended up calling his parents' house, and he actually had moved back in with his parents, except for I wasn't able to get a hold of him. I honestly can't remember how I exactly found out that he was actually had lived there, but he never responded to me or anything for a long time. So about a month went, or maybe about 2 weeks additional went by. He finally like answered the phone, and I said, "What's going on? Why haven't you brought Kiara back? What is going on here?" And he's like, "I'm not bringing her back." And I'm like, "What?" And I just didn't know what was going on. And I know we had it out right then. He said, he's like, "I'm not bringing her back to you," and that's it, and hung up with me. And at that moment, I just completely lost it. My sister-in-law, who is very, very, very rough person, I started going out with her partying. I was
Wait, now that's your sister-in-law, meaning his sister?
my sister-in-law, meaning my brother's wife.
Oh, right.
Who I was living with in California. She was, she came from a really rough background, which my brother did not know, but he only knew her for 6 weeks, and they were in the same state for 2 weeks, and then they got married. So that's what you get, I guess. So I started going out with her, and we started partying really hard. And that started about a year's worth of drinking. She introduced me to methamphetamines. She introduced me to cocaine. She introduced me to marijuana. So I was, for a whole year, I was actually keeping up with people who'd done meth for 20 years. I didn't know any better. I was just taking it all in, and I was never not loaded and drunk from that moment on. I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to do. I had contacted my parents. My parents at that time, I had never shared everything Kyle did during our marriage or anything, all of the trauma and the abuse and all of that stuff. I never shared that really with my parents. And so when it came to like, all of a sudden I'm saying this is what's happening, they took his side, and they didn't want to get in the middle or be in conflict, because they were friends with his parents. So I didn't have any support. And I was just like, my brother, I was staying at his place, but that's kind of it. So, and I had ruined my relationship with my brother because I was out with his wife all the time, and we were partying and getting into trouble. So I really just totally destroyed that relationship at that time. And I was just lost. My brother had found me with a crack pipe one time, and they had a little boy at that time, and he's like, "Don't ever do this around my kids," and stuff. And really, I think he started getting really concerned and everything, because he was he was the mom and the dad of that household, because his wife wasn't present and wasn't there either. And she did this stuff before I even came into the picture. So she'd been in this kind of world really deep for a long time. And so my brother decided to do an intervention, and my parents called and they said, "You need to come here and stay with us for a little bit." And I said, "Absolutely no." And my brother said, "If you don't, I'm going to kick you out of the house. So you have to go there." So before I did that, though, I went to legal authorities, like to, those pro bono type of government attorney stuff. I went there and I explained to him what happened with Kyle and with Kiara and everything. And I said, "Can you help me here?" And they said, "We don't have jurisdiction because she's in Missouri." So they said, off the record, we would tell you, go to Missouri, get her, come back, and then fill out a divorce document, and we will be able to help you. And so I'm like, okay. So then I said, okay, I would go to Missouri, because I had this plan, and my sister-in-law actually helped me to I was going to go there, see if I could see Kiara, and I was going to sneak her back to California. That was the plan. And so I went on the plane. I went to my parents' house. I stayed there, and my mom and dad were divorced at the time. So it was a mom and a stepdad that I stayed at their house. And so I asked Kyle if I could see Kiara, and he said yes, but he would not bring her to me. He said, "I'll take her to a hotel and we can see her. You can stay there the night with me and you can see her at this hotel." So he got to my parents' house at 9:00 at night. So I'm like, and she's already asleep. And he was leaving in the morning.
Now, how old is she at this time?
She must have been maybe about a year old at that time, because it had been a few months since he had not brought her back, maybe slightly over a year. So he came and got me. We went to a hotel. She was already asleep, as I mentioned, and stuff, so I didn't really get to like spend too much time with her. So that morning he had to get up and go to work at 5, and I'm like, how can she just stay with me today while you go to work, and then you can come in afterwards? And he just wouldn't do it. He's like, no, probably because he thought maybe I would do to him what he did to me, which I was planning on doing. So so we get up to my mom's house, and he's got a Jeep with the top down and everything, and she's in the car seat behind. So I'm like, I gotta do something, I gotta do something. So I'm pretending to say goodbye to her. I slip her out of the car seat, and I grab her, and I run up to my parents' house, and I'm pounding on the door. And I'm like, and my mom opens the door, and I rush in, and I'm like, shh, don't let Kyle in, don't let Kyle in, or I'm not gonna see Kira again. And she let Kyle in.
No.
Yeah, she let Kyle in. And so he was chasing me around the house, Kira's screaming, and I'm just like, please, Kyle, leave, please leave. And he would not leave. He like was getting physical and everything. So my mom grabs her, gives her to Kyle. He throws divorce papers down and runs out the door. And so that immediately gave him jurisdiction and gave him custody, because he threw divorce papers at that time. So he was prepared, I guess, for something like that to happen. So I really had a hard time for years blaming my parents, because I felt like I lost her because they gave her to him. And so from that moment on, I was like, I left. I said, I'm out of here. And I didn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah, like what was that conversation like after he left?
I was bawling. I just was like totally lost it. And I said, you just caused me to lose my daughter, forever now. And I was just lost it. They were going on some trip or something, and they just ended up going on the trip. And I called for a taxi, got on the plane, and came back to California and started right back up where I was. And I traveled there with meth. I was really dumb. Like I would travel with meth, and I just always had it with me and stuff. So I was even loaded then, and everything. And so that just heightens the emotions even more, obviously. And so I just picked back up. I just thought, my life is over with as far as that was concerned. And I picked back up, and I just completely went even, worse into drugs and alcohol, if that was even possible. And there was times where I would just completely black out. I didn't know what was going on or where I was or anything. I couldn't bring myself down, because if I did, I would get depression so big. So I had to stay on it. And so then it came time where my sister-in-law had taught me how to write bad checks. She did it initially. Because she's like, you know what, I really want to I don't remember what it was. It was something just material, nothing big deal. She's like, if you write a check for me, you don't have money in the account, that's okay. I'll pay you back. They'll let it go through, and then I'll pay you back next week. Well, she didn't pay me back next week, but then she would be like, can you write another check? And the thing is that, she became like a sister to me, but not in a good way, obviously, not a good relationship, but she gave me attention that I wasn't getting for so many years. And it was somebody that like I would do anything to get her attention, because I felt like she was a sister to me and was, loving me more than anybody else in my family, and it was a wrong attention. So I would do anything for her. So I kept writing checks and kept writing checks and kept writing checks.
I have a question though, really quick. How were you supporting yourself?
Well, my brother was letting me stay there for free.
Okay.
And it was between
you ever have a job?
writing. No, I didn't have a job at this time. This is another thing my sister-in-law taught me, how to flirt with men that had money.
Okay.
And so they would give me a lot of money, and I wouldn't do anything, sexually or anything.
Right.
They just gave me money, and that was supporting me. I didn't really have, other than like food and drugs, and I didn't have like debt or anything like that. Right. So I didn't have a lot of expenses or anything. But yeah, she taught me how to do that. And she would actually send me out to guys, and she had a gambling problem. So I would get 5,000, 20,000 from these guys and give it to her. And I never saw any of it, but she would like give me money to live on. And so I was actually supporting her gambling habit, by spending time with these guys and getting money and everything. And so it was like almost she was like pimping me out in a sense, minus the checks. And then I started writing these checks for her and everything. And I kept thinking, she'll pay me back. She says she'll pay me back. And it just kept adding up more and more. Well, then we went to a place that I'd gone to before to write checks, and they had pictures of me, and they were aware, and they were just waiting for me to come back. So I wrote this check, and it was for a bunch of stuff. None of this stuff was even for me. Like, it was all for her. I wrote this check, and then all of a sudden I was going up the escalator, and there were these guys behind me, and they said my name. I looked around, and my sister-in-law ran off, and they got me. And so they arrested me, and I went to jail, and I was there for 7 days, and I bawled my eyeballs out for 7 days. Nobody would like my brother. Nobody would like my sister-in-law. Just disappeared. She didn't want anything. They said if I had her bring the clothes back, they would drop some of the charges, and she wouldn't come near it, which, she was probably concerned that they were going to arrest her too. Yeah. So then she did one of the guys that these older men that had money, I was set to have a court date, and they actually, he came and he bailed me out. And so I was able to get out of jail. So I served 7 days, and then I ended up for my court date, I got probation. I had to pay back restitution fees, and then had to do some work, side work or whatever.
Or something like that.
Yeah. So, so that scared me, but you would think it would scare me into straightening up a little bit, but things just got worse.
Okay, so we gotta stop because we're actually out of time. Wow, boy, Angelus, I had no idea. This is a one interesting, crazy story. Well, guys, you gotta stay tuned for next week, because she's gonna come back and give us how it got worse, because we're gonna get to a really bad place, but then we're gonna come downhill. We're gonna start seeing where Jesus came in and saved your life. So thank you all for watching. We love you so much, and we're just so thankful that you come every Saturday to watch the journey. And I know that a lot of you get so excited because I've been out there with you, and you're like, oh, I can't wait for Saturdays. And especially when I leave you with a cliffhanger like this one. So I love you all. If you need to go and find anything else about Healing Journeys Today, please go to healingjourneystoday.com. And we've got everything on there. If you would like to donate, you can also go on there as well. And we do have, if you sign up and you're sign up for one of our newsletters, you get all the information before we put it on social media. So that's kind of cool. So you always know what's going on in Healing Journeys Today. So thank you so much, Angelus, for coming on this first show. And we will see you next week on the journey. Bye-bye.